Chapter 5. The Giant's Tomb. Gyges stood frozen in front of the sarcophagus. The earthquake had thrown him into the depths, the darkness had carried him through stone corridors, but now he had the impression that he had reached the true destination of his journey. Everything he had seen until then seemed only a preparation for the present moment. The task of facing death and mystery was much harder than the descent itself. In front of him, the immense black sarcophagus seemed to breathe a cold and solemn air, like an altar erected for a fallen god. Gyges approached with small steps. The weak light of the carved crystals in the walls danced on the surface of the stone, giving the illusion that the bas-reliefs were moving. He saw figures of people, gods and fantastic animals, all caught in a whirlwind of lines and spirals. It seemed to him that those symbols were not simple ornaments, but an unknown language, a story engraved for those who had the courage to look. Touching those shapes with his fingers, Gyges felt a strange vibration. Cold stone, but full of energy, as if his hand had awakened the shadows of those who had raised the tomb. He remembered the stories told by the village elders at the campfire, legends about the race of giants who had lived on Earth before men. The gods, fearing their power, had struck them down, burying their bodies in the depths. Where the earth trembled, there lay the forgotten colossi. I have found the tomb of one of them, Gyges thought. Feeling his blood freeze in his veins, he gathered all his strength and pushed the massive lid open. A dull creak filled the hole, and the stone moved slowly, as if it had endured centuries of silence. A wave of stale air hit his face, bringing with it the heavy smell of antiquity. His gaze sank into the darkness of the sarcophagus, and gradually, he saw the outlines. First the fragments of armor, massive plates, now covered in green and red rust, but still suggesting the greatness of a warrior. Then the bones, white but huge, disproportionate to a human body. The skull had deep sockets, like two empty caves, and the large teeth, still embedded in the jaw, made it look like a beast. The skeleton was lying with his hands on his chest, in a position of eternal sleep, but in that solemn silence, Gyges had the impression that the giant could open his eyes at any time. Never had he felt the weight of time so strongly. Before him was a body that had slept for thousands of years, witness to eras that people no longer knew. But what immediately caught his eye was the Colossus's right hand. On its bony finger shone a golden ring, intact, untouched by the passage of time. While the armor and bones had been worn away by time, the jewel seemed new, as if it had just been forged. It was a massive ring, with a large black stone, which, when reflected in the light of the crystals, sparkled with greenish flashes. It was not a simple ornament, it seemed a sacred object, a seal of power. Gyges remained motionless, his hands trembling. He felt the attraction of that ornament, but also an almost animalistic fear. If I touch it, I will be cursed, he thought. But what if this is a gift? What if the gods have brought it my way? A fierce battle was raging in his soul. In the silence of the cave, he heard a faint murmur, like a whistling wind, or maybe it was just the beating of his heart in his ears. However, a strange sensation arose in his mind, as if the grave were whispering to him. Not clear words, but a call, an urge. Take it. Pick it up, it's yours. He approached, with heavy steps, and extended his hand. His fingers had touched the cold bone, which crumbled like dust. The ring slipped easily, as if he had been waiting for that moment for ages. Gyges picked it up and looked at it for a long time. It was heavy, but not like an ordinary object, but like a burden. The stone inside it pulsed weakly, like a hidden heart. For a moment, he felt the desire to leave it there, not to wear it. But something else, an unseen power, pushed his thoughts towards the fatal gesture. To put the ring on his finger. To that moment, a warmth spread in his palm, going up his arm. He felt a shiver that went through his body, and a deep echo was heard in the air, like muffled thunder. He looked at his hands, and saw that they had disappeared. He was scared. Jumping, he fell over the rocks, dropping his staff, but when he raised his arms again, they were emptied. He was invisible. A wave of fear swept over him. But after a few moments, the fear turned to amazement and then to something more dangerous. A simple shepherd now carried a power that no king possessed. He took off his ring, and his body reappeared. He put it back on, and it disappeared. It was real. That object had the power to hide him from the eyes of the world. He stood up, his heart pounding madly. He looked back at the giant skeleton. He imagined who he had been. Perhaps a king of an extinct race, perhaps a punished demigod. And he thought, perhaps he, like me, had worn the ring. Perhaps he had lost this power. A shiver of doubt ran through him. What if the ring was cursed? What if his power attracted destruction? But at the same time, another, stronger voice answered in his mind. You have been chosen. You will carry on the legacy. You will rule the unseen world. He slowly retreated from the sarcophagus. The tomb no longer seemed like a simple crypt, but a sanctuary in which a new destiny had been born. The giant had been sleeping for thousands of years, but his ring lived, finding a new master. Gyges felt that he was no longer the same man. The shepherd who had descended into the abyss had died there, in front of the bones of the colossus, and in his place, someone else was being born. A man who carried the secret of invisibility, a man who could break any law without being caught. He looked up at the thin strip of sky above. The way back seemed long, but his heart was lighter than ever. He gathered his cloak, wrapped his staff around his back, and set off back toward the light. Behind him, the sarcophagus stood open, the giant asleep and empty of his last secret. The cave seemed to sigh, as if it knew that an era had ended. But for Gyges, everything was just beginning.